walk over them and hopefully they don't wake up and do something to you. But in this particular place, there was one thing my brother and I feared the most. There were 4 squirrel-sized sewer rats that ran the ceiling and the walls by 9:30 at night. That's all we would hear. Day in, day out. They're playing in the halls. And my brother and I was it was called a railroad flat. And off the hall where there were rooms, master bedroom at the very end, and all the way to this end was a living room. And right in the middle of that hallway was the bathroom. And the heating system that went up the floor to the ceiling, if you didn't put a metal plate on that ceiling, the rats will play in the floorboard and eventually come into your apartment. These 4 squirrel-sized sewer mangy rats came into our apartment every night. My mother would leave the light on, figuring that this would be a way to scare them away, but they came in search of food. My mother was very clean. Her house was immaculate. Mom and Grandma kept an immaculate home. And sometimes we would slip up and leave a loaf of bread on the sink, and when you wake up in the morning, that loaf of bread was gone, pulled underneath the refrigerator. One day, my brother and I decided we cannot wage war on all of the heroin addicts here. We cannot wage war on all of the prostitution that's happening in this neighborhood. Sure can't wage war on the guys and the gals who are sticking people up, but we can sure enough wage war on these 4 squirrel-sized sewer rats that's been haunting us for the last year or so. We're living on 115th Street. We went to Central Park, 5 blocks up, using our southern skills, and created bow and arrows. 9:30 that night, we'd already showered, and we decided that this was the night we were going to wage war on the least of our enemies. We'd already showered because once the night fell, you don't want to corner a sewer rat. We were one day sitting in our living room having a sudden shutdown. Cornbread, hot chocolate, and tea. The adults all sat in the kitchen with us. Grandma had them cook this steaming hot chocolate and this cornbread, and all of a sudden, this rat appeared from underneath the refrigerator. And my brother had the audacity to take the broom to spot this thing. This rat ran up that broom, up his shoulders, across his neck, and on the kitchen sink and behind the refrigerator. This was one reason why we did not want to go into that bathroom after the night was time to shut down. So we sat in the living room, a nice, quiet house, and before we realized it, the first rat came out. My brother and I quickly snatched our feet up off the floor, and we pulled back on the arrow and released on the bow and released the first arrow. That rat jumped over that arrow and back into the bathroom. And before you realize it, now my brother and I both are sitting there ready for this, and we pulled back on the bow, and 2 of them came out, and we released that arrow. Those rats jumped over those arrows and back in the bathroom. And we kept going back and forth and back and forth, and before you realize it, all of the arrows were on the other side of the enemy line. And we weren't going to go to get it. So my brother and I decided we were going to go into the kitchen to rethink our military strategy over a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Well, you look at me, I'm possibly the neat guy. I was after that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and what our new military strategy was going to be for the next day, I went to the kitchen sink and washed up. Rinsed my mouth out, hands off. My brother and I slept in the same room, in the same bed. The next morning we woke up, we realized that the enemy had invaded our camp. And wherever my brother left that peanut butter and jelly, they took it. His hand was gnawed on during the night. And Dr. King spoke about it, and going to Chicago was the one reason why he wanted to go to Chicago, because he wanted to experience what it was like living in the big cities and the ghettos. He spoke about how much they were charging us more rent to live in this swamp. He spoke about how the rats would not only eat peanut butter and jellies off the little kids who were silly enough to go to bed, but he also spoke about it. And the babies were regurgitated nights in the cribs. But when I woke up the next morning and saw the blood all over that bed and all of our white little skivvies and the way Mom just sort of lightly starched those sheets and how immaculate this place was, it was that point that I looked at myself and I said, the only reason why we were here was because of the lack of education. Because if you think that all Harlem was like that, you don't know your American history. On the west side was Adam Clayton Powers, Percy Sutton, Langston Hughes, Romare Bearden, Jacob Lawrence, Nora Zeal Hurston. They were all educated on the other side of town. Is when I realized that education will give you freedom and opportunity. The only reason why we were in this was because of the lack of education. Several years have gone by. But prior to that, I had discovered, the first time I went to a movie theater, I discovered photography. The first movie I ever saw, because it was the first time I've ever allowed to go into a movie theater, was Ben-Hur. Sat right down there in the front row, and that screen lit up, and Ben-Hur was on the screen, and I just loved it. Came home, and I said to Mom, I want to be a photographer. A couple of years went by, and I met my middle school teacher, Mrs. Miriam H. Powers. She saw something in me I could not see in myself. Imagine, we're still in the civil rights movement, and this little Jewish woman who lives in Mount Vernon, New York, saw something in me I could not see in myself. She says, Richard, you're not just a good photographer, but look at your ability to paint. Every weekend, that woman took me. At this point, parents are making a little more money. We now moved into the Bronx. This woman took me out of this area every weekend, from the 7th grade all the way to the 12th grade. She would take me out of that neighborhood, and Saturday morning, she would take me into the Met, the Cooper Hewitt, the Modern Art, the Whitney, the Guggenheim, the Natural History, and she would sit me down and she would talk to me about the perfect proportion of the Greeks. She would talk to me about the Romans and the Mayans. And she talked to me about the history of art and the lines and the shapes and the shadows and the textures and the form. And she said, you're going to be an artist, and I'm not going to let you slip away. Well, some of the young people in here, be aware. Because when you get to high school, you know, bell-bottom pants, 1968, bell-bottom pants, bleached out work shirt, polka dot ties were more important than education, which I thought. And my mentor and I lost a moment there. I slipped up high school. I could not go on to college. It's the height of the Vietnam War. 6 months after graduating from high school, I was drafted into the Vietnam War. Did my 4 years in the Air Force, came back home, and I saw the squalor still of my community. 1972. The Bronx had started to burn down right in the presence of us. That woman met me at the airport. This was a Great Samaritan. We do know the story of the Great Samaritan, right? Dr. King spoke about it when we were Thinking of the sanitation man, that man stood on that ground, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees walked by, and that great Samaritan who was the nobody of that neighborhood stopped by and said that if I do not stop, can't think about myself, but I have to think about that man that's on that ground. And this is Miriam H. Powers. Didn't think about what people in Mount Vernon, New York would probably say to her when she would bring home this little Negro boy. She did not think about that. She thought about that if I do not help this young man, what will happen to him? I got to school. I was a full-time academic warrior. Paraprofessional teacher from 7 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon. From 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 10, 11 o'clock at night, I was a full-time student at Herbert H. Lehman College. Got my bachelor's of fine arts, and she said, oh, you're not going to stop there. You're going to get your master's. Went to Pratt Institute. I was a student at Pratt Institute, 7:30 in the morning until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. From 1 o'clock in the afternoon and from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 10, 11 o'clock at night, I ran 4 community arts centers in the South Bronx. Unfortunately, Mrs. Miriam H. Powers died before I was able to complete my master's, but today, ladies and gentlemen, her children still come to every major exhibition I have. So here it is, I graduated. A lot of the jobs that I've been doing was in my neighborhood. Finally, all my life, my mother kept telling me, son, I want you to be like the majority, like the white folks. I want you to speak like them. I want you to talk like them. I want you to act like them. I want you to raise income like them. I want you to, Mom, not like you, not like Dad, not like Grandma. Be like the majority, Mom. And finally it came time for me to get a real job. Opened up the New York Times after graduating from Pratt Institute in 1979. I put on a Brooks Brothers suit, a Paul Stewart bow tie, a Johnson and a Murphy suit, bought the best money a portfolio can buy, and I went to my first job after looking at the New York Times and knocked on the door. Knocked on the door, and I can see this woman coming through a peek hole. Imagine a peek hole. And this woman coming, and that peek hole blind out. That person looked through that door, and I heard that person coming up the hallway. That person looked through that door and never even opened the door. I got on the subway and I said, God, why in the world did you curse me into a black man? 30 years old. I have done everything for this country. But I am still not good enough. That quiet voice said to me on that subway, what you think is a curse, I have turned it into a blessing a long time ago. 2 weeks later, my wife had a colleague at CBS television. She was working for Columbia Records. But she had a friend who was working for CBS. And they owned a publishing group called Holt Rinehart and Winston. And when we don't believe in affirmative action, ladies and gentlemen, here goes when affirmative action kicked in on my behalf. There was a job open for an African-American male who had some knowledge about photography. I was there. Right place at the right time. Worked for that company for 8 years. Went on. Opened my own company, editorial photography for the last 30 some odd years. Illustrated for some of the best publishers in this country. Holt Rinehart and Winston, McGraw-Hill, Harcourt Brace, Silver Burdett, Addison Wesley, Princeton Hall, Oxford University Press, American Express, you name it. That was only a part of the blessing. That was the strength gaining part, but it wasn't there yet. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, in my life, God just kept talking. Kept talking and kept telling me that what you thought was a curse is truly a blessing. Ladies and gentlemen, had I not gone through that struggle with my family and gained strength and gained the freedom through education, young folks, education will give you freedom and opportunities. The true blessing, ladies and gentlemen, is being a great Samaritan. It wasn't about me getting the good jobs, making the good income. It was about me learning how to pay it forward. Christ said, I came here not to be served. I came to be a servant. What would have happened to me had I not been helped by Mrs. Mary Maid's powers? The history book shows us, the newspaper shows us on a day-to-day basis. Incarceration, death, heroin, crack this day and age. I am a true blessing because my Father has lifted me up from the pits of hell and set me on the throne of righteousness. Not for my name's sake, but for his name's sake. Not what the country can do for me, but what can I do for this country? On my watch, ladies and gentlemen, now, no child is ever left out of the educational process that they come across my desk. I have now the ability to truly pay it forward. Now I can imagine Dr. King being here right now. I drive to work all the time and I have conversation with my friends all the time. What would Dr. King be doing right now if he was here? What would he be doing? I can imagine Dr. King developing a 360-degree plan. What's a 360-degree plan? It takes a community to educate a child. I've seen it for the last 8 years. It takes a community to educate a child. Some transcripts that I see on my desk, and some of the most difficult community out of this country, and I'm still saying that it's still happening. I'm saying, who in the world led this child? It takes a community to educate a child. And Dr. King would have been calling us, just as I heard us all call the youth today, calling us and saying, we must come together. Every teacher, every politician, every businessman, every doctor, every lawyer, every parent, every guidance counselor, everyone must come together and lead these children through the higher ed process. That is called being a good Samaritan. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the call. This is your community. It's our country. When every child is going through the process, we will have a great state. We will have great cities. We will have a great country.